morning. It's Tuesday, the 7th of March 2023, which happens to be my birthday. Happy birthday to me. I'm reading out of Scarlet Feather. It's a book written by Joan Grant. She was a very famous writer in the 40s, 50s, I guess 60s. What was not so much known is that she was a writer who wrote from her own farm memories. She was famous with Winged Pharaoh, and there were quite a few very interesting books. Life as Corolla was also beautiful. Anyway, plenty to read. This is Scarlet Feather, the story about Piyannah and Raki. And they were together from the beginning. They're cousins. Their mothers are both dead. And they were born into an Indian tribe many thousands of years ago, somewhere in the West. And they were outcasts only because Piyannah's mother, who raised them both, is strong enough to defy tribal customs and a chief. So when she dies, her children have joined the tribe of her father, Piyannah's father, who's Nakachi, the tribe of the two trees. And we're now quite a bit on in the story, and this is a very long chapter. It's about Piyannah going through the ordeals of a brave. She wants to be a brave. All the feathers have got meanings. Scarlet feather is the highest accolade. Now, Piyannah and Raki have already taken part in a battle, and they must be about 16 now, because she's talking about her 17th birthday, because the two of them want to lead a tribe, their tribe, together. She has just successfully finished the first ordeal, or maybe several, but this one was what she described. And she got a beautiful compliment, because when she awoke after this arduous journey in the canoe, she said, "So you're not ashamed of me? Oh, Dorok, I am so glad." "No, Piyannah," he said gently, "I shall never be ashamed of my chief," which must have made her feel wonderful. I had already killed 5 stags which were beyond their 5th year, so Dorok said I need only kill a grizzly to fulfill my ordeal of the hunter, and that with my tracking and woodcraft he was already satisfied. Hunting a grizzly would probably follow much the same pattern as when I had found Pico, but now I should not have Gorky and Takini with me. If the grizzly attacked, I should have no hope of rescue. If I were wounded too badly to make my own way home, I should die alone. The grizzlies were my friends now. Now I had to kill one of them to prove I was a hunter. I think I should have failed in this ordeal if I had not seen the body of a child who had gone into a grizzly's cave. It was kept crushed to a bloody pulp, but the face was unmarked, except by terror. The track of the bear which had killed her led into the mountains, and Dorok granted me the right to avenge her death. For 16 days I followed these tracks. Twice I saw him in the distance, a solitary male with no white marks, so I knew he was not Pico. He was wary, and every day moved to a new feeding ground. Several times I tried to approach him, but though I kept in close cover, he always moved on before I could get within bowshot. Would he never choose a cave where I might hope to ambush him? The first snows had fallen. Very soon I should have to go back to Dorok and admit failure. Unless Dorok let me kill a spring bear, I should have to wait until next autumn before I could hope for the brown feather and Raki. To hunt a bear at night was against all the rules I had been taught, and I shall never be sure why I attempted it. I had come to a place where there were many large boulders scattered in the open mountainside. I knew the bear was hiding amongst them, but to follow him there would be to give him every advantage. It seemed madness, but I knew it was the only way to avoid another year of separation. I walked slowly upwind, arrow notched to the bowstring, tomahawk hanging ready from my belt. I asked Great Bear and Pico to forgive me for punishing this outlaw of their tribe. Perhaps they heard me and held him in sleep, for I saw him stretched out, half hidden by the denser shadow of a boulder. A bar of moonlight fell across his shoulder, giving me a clear target to try the difficult shot to the heart. He tried to struggle up with the arrow buried under his foreleg. Then he lurched over on his side and blood trickled out of his mouth. I waited with another arrow notched, but he did not move. I crouched, watching him until his eyes slowly opened. He did not blink. But was he watching me? Slowly I crept nearer. His eyes had begun to glaze, so I knew I should not be one of the hunters who die because they think a wounded grizzly is dead. I hacked off the forepaws, which should prove I had fulfilled the ordeal and earned the claws to wear on my necklace. Then, before I left him, I asked Great Bear to take him back into his tribe, for the feud between his people and ours was ended. I put the bear's paws into the leather sack I had used for bread. On the third day I tied the thong more tightly around the neck of it to try to keep the smell at bay. Every night I made a fire and at dawn sent smoke signals to Raki. I was on my way home. I knew how eagerly he would watch for the smoke, as I had watched when he was winning his bear's claws during the previous moon. The mountains were already covered with snow, and even on the lower slopes it lay in the deeper gullies. Only 2 more deals remained: the winter journey and the climbing of the Listener, the highest mountain of the range. I knew Doruk would not let me attempt the Listener until the spring, but this did not matter, because Raki and I could not be given our brown feathers until the ritual ceremony of the sowing, which took place before the moon of the choosing. To spend 7 days alone in the great cold sounds very easy. 7 small wooden tokens branded with a tribal mark sound a trivial burden, but each token must be put in one of the 7 places chosen for the ordeal to prove that you have been here, and you must spend the 7 days without the companionship of fire. Cold can be more cruel than cougars. It can gnaw fingers from your hands and cripple your feet. It can rot away your ears and your nostrils. It can be venomous as a rattlesnake and scar like fire. Imagine. It was bleak comfort that Raki and I were to start the ordeal on the same day, for the places allotted to us were so far apart that there would be no hope of either of us reaching the other in time if we sensed the stealthy approach of this quiet white death. We both chose the same kind of clothes: knee-high moccasins lined with beaver pelt, fur caps which covered the forehead and ears, and 2 tunics, the inner one fur-lined, the outer of oiled leather. We should carry our food, breadsticks and pemmican rolled in a blanket between our shoulders. Doruk had advised us each to make a tomahawk for cutting branches to make shelters, and a sling, which might be means of getting warm, raw flesh, which would help us resist the cold. We did not need to be reminded to take a second pair of snowshoes, for we remembered the young brave who last winter had not returned from his ordeal. Gorky and I were there when the melting snow gave up his body. He wore only 1 snowshoe. We never found the other, which had betrayed him to the drift. Cold sometimes grows jealous of the living, but it is kind to the dead. The young brave looked as though he had only just gone to claim the right of entry to the happy hunting ground. The ordeal began at dawn. The first stage was easy, so I should be able to reach it in time to make a shelter before sunset. There was a clear, pale sun and no wind. It might have been any ordinary day instead of the first of the 7 days. Fresh snow scrunched underfoot, and the trees, wrapped in their white blankets, were solemn as elders in council. I saw a snow hare and was glad that I was neither cold nor hungry enough to need a kill. It sat up on its haunches and then bounded away across the unbroken whiteness. Later I saw a stag. He stood to watch me, then walked quietly down a narrow track as though he knew I had not come as a hunter. But noon By noon there was a real warmth in the sun. I took off both tunics so that my body could store the gentle heat against the night. I left the first token in a cleft of a high rock, then cut some pine boughs to make a shelter and spread more of them to lie on. There was a level space from which it was easy to sweep the snow, protected on the windward side of the rock. If fire had not been forbidden, it would have been a friendly place. But I slept soundly and woke hoping that Raki had been here, had been more comfortable. Until the fourth day the weather remained kind, then it began to snow. Under the trees I was protected, but in the open the rising wind drove into my face. The heavy flakes clung to my eyelashes and made it still more difficult to see the way. I think that if this stretch of country had not been very familiar, I should never have found the next stage. For only those rocks whose sides were too steep to allow foothold to the snow were safe landmarks. The snow tried to drag me down and swallowed my tracks before I had gone more than 10 paces forward. Here there were no trees to give me branches for a shelter, so I cut snow into blocks and built them into a hollow circle, 3 tiers of these, and then my blanket stretched over the top and weighted with stones. I knew that if the storm grew into a blizzard, I might be buried, but if I stayed out on the exposed hillside, I should never survive the knives of winter. So I finished this here. I'll read this in 3 parts. That was kind of rather moving. I hate the cold. So this spoke to me. Today is the 7th of March, and as it's my birthday, I only